Welcome to Connected Through Christ, a podcast where faith meets real life. Your host, Jeremy Johnson.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Connecting Through Christ, another episode of. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Miss Miranda Maverick joining us today. If you're not familiar with Miranda, she currently fights in the UFC in the flyweight division. She has an upcoming fight against Tracy Cortez in December, and we're going to let her speak and have the floor today. So let's get started. Amanda, welcome to the show, and I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you.
So let's get started for the audience. Why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about your past, who you were?
Yeah, I can do that. I started out in Missouri. That's where I was born, and I say raised. I was raised there until I was about 5 years old. My parents were both Christians when I was born, continue to both be Christians, although they are separated. My dad lives in Missouri now. And so what we did was after I was 5 years old, we moved around a lot, moved to Tennessee, to Arkansas, Florida, Wyoming, Kentucky, eventually found our way back to Missouri as a family. And that's because my dad started doing rural land investment. And so what he'd do is find like this junk piece of land, basically clean it up. And that's how myself and my younger siblings and I learned to work hard and have good work ethic and all that kind of stuff. It was always farm-esque kind of places. We raised cattle. And now that we're back in Missouri, we have the ranch that we run, where we also help build fence, make the corral, all that kind of stuff. And now my dad has his beef cattle there. I have land actually adjacent to the ranch that's now attached to it, and my dad's running beef cattle on it as well until I retire and return back home, So that's kind of where I'm at geographically and how I was raised. When I was very young, my family went to church every Sunday. They were that kind of people. And then there was a pastor that we knew who was charged and actually went to jail for rape and molestation and such of young children. Unfortunately, that kind of turned my dad, especially. My dad's very anti that. Actually, it's kind of the reason I got into jujitsu to begin with and stuff. My dad was like, nothing like that's ever going to happen to my children. I'm going to fight for it as much as I can within my family first. And so started teaching us at home the basics of jujitsu and stuff, and went from there. As a result, though, the sad part of it is we stopped going to church. We started doing home church and stuff, still learn from the Bible. My dad did little sermonettes, I guess you'd say, on Sundays. We'd all pray together around the table, sometimes even watch sermons on TV and stuff, but never stepped foot into church again until I was 17 or 18 years old. I think I was 18. And when I moved off to college, which was actually at Drury University, just so happen to have this shirt on right now, I started going to like the little non-denominational, meetings they had at college. Couldn't stand it. Very lukewarm Christian service, which, the whole purpose is to bring these college kids that most of them are atheist or agnostic and bring them to some semblance of Christ, I guess you'd say. But the messages were not correcting. They weren't convicting. They weren't what I expected to hear when I walked into a church. So I stopped going again. And I got to the point where I kind of grew the same attitude, I guess you'd say, of listen, like people are such sinners. Like, why should I listen to a sinner tell me how God works? I'll just read the Bible myself and determine myself, what God's supposed to tell me. I do not agree with that anymore. I think there are people who are blessed by God to share his word. I think there's people out there that are not false teachers that spread it accurately and truly, and you just have to be really careful who you listen to and who you learn from. And I've been very blessed to have found my husband who kind of directed me down the right path with that. And we went to several churches when I first started dating him. And he was like, I really want you to get back into church. Like, we were both Christians. And I would argue that I lived my life more Christian than he did initially. But he was kind of like, we should really like get on the right path. We're all sinners. And I think we need someone else's leadership in our relationship as well, beyond just our parents and our family. And so started looking, found a good church out in Virginia where I was at doing grad school, where I met my husband. And then when we moved here to Colorado for my sport, obviously for training, we found Brave Church, which is out here with Pastor Jeff, and he does an amazing job. The first sermon I ever went to for Brave Church was just a sit-in one, and we were just testing out churches. And it was literally a sermon on gender roles and there being only two genders in the Bible. and how everybody has a gender role and how a wife is supposed to be submissive and how a husband is supposed to treat his wife like the church. And I was appalled. I was like, whoa, all these people are going to get up and leave. I'm like, oh, I loved it. But I really thought, I was like, oh my goodness, how's this person have anybody following him? And it's a pretty big church. And everybody was clapping and cheering. And I remember tearing up and being like, wow, like this is where I need to be. Like he's teaching the gospel unashamedly. He's not doing the whole whatever society says is fine. And so from there, I started going to Brave. Still don't go as consistently as I wish I did. I've got a busy life and I run my businesses and have stuff on Sundays a lot. But listen to the sermons almost every Sunday with my husband, and we share them with the family. And now the whole family goes to church off and on, and we all listen to sermons together on Sundays sometimes, and it's awesome.
That's powerful. I love how you bring up, about the church. I believe the same. Like in today's age, we have so many big churches out there that seem to be full of just entertainment, right?
Yeah.
The itching ears Christianity, the lukewarm
Yeah.
Christianity.
Yes.
And we know in Revelation 3 what Jesus says about being lukewarm.
Hmm.
That disgusts him. He wants you to, spew them out of his mouth. And it's a testament to today because it's harder to get a church where they're preaching truth. They're not worried about entertainment or watered down doctrine or
Yep.
just the message of just love and positivity.
Yeah,
So
the word, the gospel isn't supposed to make you feel good. It's supposed to make you feel bad. It's supposed to make you recognize your humility and your shame and your sin. And people who are like, well, I'm a good person. It's like none of us are good people. The only good person that's ever lived on this earth was Jesus, like we're all terrible sinning people. And whether you think, oh, I'm better than that person down the street, like if you look, all of us have committed every single 10 commandment. At some point, we have committed those sins.
absolutely well stated. And even the commandments themselves, as basic of a teaching as it is, a lot of people still don't look to the commandments like
Mhm.
God commanded us to do these things. He's not asking, he's commanding.
Right.
And it's unfortunate in this day and age, people have just shattered doctrine into pieces and just, kind of leave judgment out of the way. And
Yeah,
you know,
leave the Lord part of God
yes,
out of the
that's
way.
right.
Believe in him, love
Yes.
him, but don't see him as your Lord.
That's right. They don't get the full picture, and that's not truth. That's
Mhm.
deception.
Yep.
That's pretty powerful. So, what's going on in your life today? What's God doing for you these days?
Man, so many things, they always say not always will your life get better when you're following God. Sometimes you get ridiculed and a lot of bad things happen, but I will say I've been very blessed in my life. I've felt God kind of following my path from the start. There are certain times where I have felt a pull back in my life where I'm like, I'm not doing the right thing. I need to get back on the right track. And I laugh and tell people certain times where I'm like, yeah, he had to do more than just nudge me or suggest to me. I felt like I got pushed really hard sometimes to go a way that I didn't feel like was right at the time. And now looking back, I'm like, wow, what a life change that was for the better that seemed like such a bad thing at that time. And it's really changed my life from that aspect. But currently now, man, so many blessings, honestly. Like, of course, I still have hardships. I'm still working really hard for it, but I always tell everybody, you got to meet him halfway. I love saying this analogy, which I think it's a whole story, but my dad says the whole a guy has his house flooded, and he's on the top of his roof asking God for help. And God sends two people on a boat to save him. And the guy's like, no, God will save me. It's fine. And then he sends a helicopter to save him. And the guy's like, no, no, God will save me. And then the guy drowns and dies, right? And I'm like, yeah, you gotta help God out. He's like,
Right.
he's helping you. He's putting it right there. He's giving you opportunities. He's giving you paths. You just can't sit on your butt. And that's kind of how I live my life. I try to work really hard and I try to hustle while I'm young and while I can and just kind of fill my life with everything I can, with the passion and with the love of Christ, like everything that I can to accomplish what I can and make a future for my children and for my family and spread the gospel within that. And for me, it's like now my husband and I are working on a newborn adoption. We're in the final stages of going towards that. Starting Christmas Day, we'll start matching for newborns. So we're just very excited. I mean, that's a blessing in and of itself. It's been a hard, expensive road to
I
get to
bet.
this point, and we're just praying for the health of whatever birth mother comes into our life, and of course the child that will come along with that. So we're praying for that part of it. Aside from that, of course, MMA is going well. I'm happy and healthy, and that's all I can ask for. I'm kind of putting my own self in danger. I always say I make these choices myself when people are like, "Wow, isn't that hard?" And I'm like, "Well, I chose this life,
That's
so
right.
I'll deal with this life." And I've been really healthy during this fight camp, so I'm really excited about that. I won't talk too much about the fight, but let's just say that today there were some changes with that fight, but it is still on the same date. So that's all I'll say is I'll still be fighting December 14th. Hopefully news will be coming out soon. I'm not allowed to say anything right now.
I completely
Um,
understand.
Yep. But yeah, blessings beyond blessings on that aspect. I will say back home in Missouri, we're having a lot of hardship on the ranch. I think government and all kinds of sin has a lot to do with it, but weather's been terrible in Missouri. There's huge droughts and FEMA's not doing anything about it. So cattle market's down, farmers are hurting everywhere, but because my dad makes his living off of the beef cattle and as a whole our ranch survives off the beef cattle, we're doing very poorly this year, having to get rid of a lot of cattle. Hay's very expensive. No rain compared to usual. Meanwhile, we're getting flooded out here in Colorado. So kind of
Right.
crazy how that aligns with different weather impacts that are happening.
I can read between the lines.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think it's awesome what you said too. It's a good point. As Christians, we need to do our part. God will do his, but it's
Yep.
not for us to sit back and relax. We
Yeah,
need to do
exactly.
our part. And
Yep.
so many Christians get caught up sometime in staying in like, well, God's not doing anything for me. Well, but what are you doing for God?
Yeah, and it's like I'm praying, and it's like, well, can you do more? Are you able to do
Absolutely.
more? Haven't you given yourself to his lordship? Like we were talking about. It's like a lot of people are like, I believe him, I love him, I do this, and it's like you don't want to be the one standing in front of him and he say, "Get away from me, I never knew you," and it's like, yeah, just because you love someone and know about them doesn't mean that you are a slave to them. And in truth, like we're supposed to be a servant to God, we're supposed to be a slave to God, and so many people nowadays get offended by that because the lie that has been told to them about Christianity. And it's truly sad. And like growing up and kind of seeing that, I shouldn't even say growing up, like even as a kid seeing that, but in fighting, in life, running into others who say, I'm a Christian, and then seeing the way they live their lives or the way they even talk about Christ is a shock.
It is. For me personally, I'm a fire and brimstone kind of guy. I can listen to a 1970s pastor and probably love that sermon. You know,
Yeah.
in today's watered down message or love message just does not work for me.
Yeah.
When I first got on the road of learning who God was and trying to serve him, I needed that hardcore message. I needed to get punched in the face. You
Yeah.
know, God tell me, look, boy, get it together. And you
Hmm.
know, I know not everybody deals well with fire and brimstone messages, but for me, that's what I needed.
Okay.
And I just feel it's a shame that we've gotten to a point in society, especially here in America, because you brought it up about persecution
Hmm.
earlier. We don't get persecuted much. We still have freedom of religion. We still have
Hmm.
freedom of speech, even though some of those things seem to be dwindling. Listen,
Hmm.
overseas, Christians are dying for Jesus, literally getting their lives taken. And so over here, people are worried about stepping on toes or walking on eggshells because they don't want to, hurt somebody's feelings or say certain things. And it's like, look, God expects us to stand up and stand firm.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, I see anyone who kind of does that as a false teacher. I hope you do get to bring my dad on. He actually, I'll just say a little bit about him, was raised in a cult. And that's another reason that he was very much like, I guess, against pastors as he got older and like kind of found a church that he thought was good and then was kind of like, I'm done with all this crap. I'm done with religion. And I like to say that I'm not a religious person, even though everybody would be like, well, Miranda's a Christian, she's religious. And it's like, I
Right.
am a Christian. My Christianity is based on my relationship with God, not me practicing rituals and all that kind of thing. It isn't religion to me. It's believing in God and trusting God and having a relationship, which I hope to grow more in every day. My dad and I were just discussing. I was like, you're so much more mature than me when it comes to sharing the gospel. I'm not the best at introducing it into conversations with people where when I'm with my dad, I'm like, wow, you found a way. Like you found a way to introduce that, or you found a way to get into this person's head. And like now you're talking about God with them for 30 minutes. And meanwhile, I'll be like, I'll pray for you or something. And I'm like, wow, I really need to grow in that subject, and I've been trying to do that a lot. I think it helps that he is a man, he is a little bit older, so people kind of look up to him, and see him as a respectable member of society, where a lot of people still see me as like this kid or younger than them or whatever. But even influencing children I work with and kids I see at the park and that kind of thing. Like, if you're not going to mention God, at least do something good in their lives, have a positive influence on them, say something nice to them. And that's kind of the end goal, right? For all of us is to represent ourselves as Christians, live our life as Christians, and represent God well with how we live our lives.
Absolutely. I was messaging back and forth with your dad the other evening,
Mhm.
and I definitely would like to get him on the show. I don't know how hectic his schedule is, but I told
His
him,
biggest problem is Wi-Fi.
really?
We just have really bad signal out there, so that's why he's always really hesitant to hop on calls. They end up being really patchy. But
Yeah.
what we could do, in fact, and I know this is on the recorded part, but if you wanted to connect with him during my fight week when he's down there in Tampa, I bet I could make it happen.
We'll try and set something up that week
All
then.
right. Yeah,
Absolutely. That
that'd be
would be
awesome.
perfect. So I'll message him after and we'll try
Yeah,
to work those details out.
perfect.
Yeah, but I want to have him on, especially after hearing that now. I'm like really
Hmm.
excited.
Yeah.
The religion thing is a big deal too. I grew up Catholic. So I was
Okay.
born and raised Catholic, and here in South Louisiana, Catholic is pretty dominant down here.
Yeah.
So growing up in that way, it was hard for me to start searching for truth and start reading the Bible, and then all of a sudden start to realize, oh, wait, something's not lining up right here. But then I have generations before me that all believe the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's accepting, were they all wrong?
Yeah.
Be
Yeah,
right.
it's hard. It's hard.
Very,
And you can
very
love
hard.
those people and like those people and respect them, but the end of the day, to find truth it is kind of hard to do and step out of that shadow for sure. I'm very blessed that I didn't really have that. My dad's very big about gospel teaching centered on the gospel. And you'll see, like you said, with Catholics, it's actually, I'd say, the main religion that kids move away from any kind of believement in. If they were raised Catholic, a lot of them don't want anything to do with religion as they get older, just because of like how strict and how many things there were to keep up with. And they're like, it didn't seem right. And so now, nope, don't believe in God at all. And it's not just, Catholic or anything.
Sure,
I'm not even
absolutely.
crapping on them. There's the Mormon religion, and we have neighbors that are Mormons and they're great people, but you ask them, and if you don't ask the right questions, you'd never know they believe any different than, the base Christian. And it's like, do you believe in Jesus? Yes, they do, but it's like, do you believe he's your Lord and Savior? No, absolutely not. So it's like you have to find that truth within the Bible and read it yourself. I always think everybody needs to read the Bible at least once or twice themselves. Every time you read it, you're going to find something new in it that you feel convicted about or go, really? I didn't remember that happening. And you'll see who God really is. And he's not just a loving God. He's not just a sweet, kind, rainbows kind of guy. He's an angry God. He's a jealous God. He wants servitude. He wants you to give your all to him. And people are like, oh, that sounds like a terrible God. And I'm like, he's our father. How would you feel as a parent? You don't want your kid running around doing stupid crap. You want their love and respect. You want them to listen to you. They need obedience. They need discipline. And I've had friends that are complete atheists that then go, oh, I never thought of it that way. And it's like, yeah, just think of God as your father, like a father who loves you more than your earthly father's ever going to.
That's some great points. I know, especially when it comes to, trying to read the Bible and just spending time with God, whether it's prayer and trying to get that strong. For me personally, that was a weak point, and my last semester in seminary, I had a theology of prayer class, which
Mm.
helped me. But I find that so many people these days I don't have time to pray. I don't have time to read the Bible, but yet they spend hours on social media or they spend hours entertaining themselves. And that's still a big part of it. They don't realize, like, having that relationship, you have to spend time with God. You have
Right.
to learn about him, and part of that's reading the Bible. And like you said,
Mhm.
every time you read it, God may reveal something else in a deeper layer to you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't make other things idols, right? Can't make sports an idol, for example. You can't make your TV or your phone or even your family. And that's hard for some people to understand, but God comes first before family, before your wife, before your kids. God's first. Like he's the one that's granted you and given you all those things. And to be grateful for things, but also realize when they are worse for you than better. One of my favorite parts of the Bible isn't the story of Job. I hate the story of Job. But I love the part where the devil is able to take everything, but Satan keeps his wife there because she's such a contentious wife that it's actually hurting him in his path towards God instead of helping him. And I thought that was really important for me as a wife to understand kind of my role and how much you can influence the men around you, the children around you. Like, it is not my responsibility to teach my husband about God. That's not my role, right? I can influence, I can tell him my opinions, but I'm not supposed to teach in any way. I truly believe that. Like, children, yes. Other women, yes. But in a church, I don't have responsibility to teach men about the gospel, right? Their responsibility is to teach others and to learn to submit to him while also being a woman of modern society, while also being a woman who I am strong and I am a powerful female and everything, but to submit to him in terms of, hey, what decisions do you want to make? You're in charge of this, this, and this. Do you give me permission to do this, this, and this? And a lot of wives are like, oh, that's putting yourself down and that's this. And I was like, I'm doing what the Bible calls me to do. Our most responsible or our most important decision in life is to choose the right man. So you better choose one that's going to lead you the right way. If he doesn't lead you the right way and you feel like he's not, that's your own problem. You shouldn't have ever picked that person to yoke yourself to.
That's powerful. And same thing, I find my wife is more of an alpha personality, myself
Hmm.
included. And but she has no problem in following that part of the Bible.
Hmm.
She's confident in herself. She has her own abilities and so forth, but she has no problem with allowing me to lead the way, you
Yep.
know. Um, and it works perfectly that way. God has it written
Hmm.
that way for a specific reason.
Yeah.
We just sometimes we can complicate God. We can make things complicated in
Hmm.
our life, but if we just give in and let go sometimes and let God, tend to see things tend to work out very easily, you know, very
Very
easily.
much so.
So, tell me a little bit about what you got going on with businesses and stuff. I know, I got some pickles from you and some honey and delicious.
Yeah.
So how'd you start off doing these things?
Yeah, so first obviously I have my fighting. Started that with jujitsu, then slowly turned into, hey, you know what? I'm gonna take a fight and I'll see if I like it and if I'm good at it and I'll go be the best I can be. And if I'm bad at it or I just don't like hitting this girl, maybe I feel too bad while I'm hitting her, then I'll never do it again and I'll count it off as a check on my bucket list, right? And I was nervous because I'd never trained with females before and I was like, oh, I might not want to hit her because funny story about my dad is I wasn't allowed to hit a girl when I was young. Like, I was raised very much like a boy. Like, I was raised on a ranch. I was always been very physically strong. I just have been. And he trained me at home, so I knew basics. I could wrestle better than, any other goofball cousin in the family or anything like that. And so when I was in school growing up, my dad's like, don't you ever let me hear about you hitting a girl. I will whoop your butt. He's like, but if a boy touches you or does anything, you whoop him, And then it was
Unleash.
like, yes, sir. And as I got older, I find it funny that now I'm beating women up for my living.
Right.
But I always joke with him about that. But I was always worried I'd feel weird about it. But I'm like, man, when you're in there and getting punched in the face too, and they're trying to hurt you, it's a little different.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of how that journey started. Then from the ranch life, we made pretty much all our own food. We didn't go to the grocery store too often. Like we did, we'd buy Big Sam's Club products and stuff, but we had our own milk cows, we had our own chickens, we canned our own food, we made our own salsa, had our own garden. And so as I grew up, I learned how to can and learned how to vacuum seal and learned how to butcher animals and all the basics, I guess you'd say, for survival that I feel like a lot of my generation just have no idea. Like they don't
Oh,
even
that's
know how to do
that's a
anything but
lost
warm up.
knowledge. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lost
They're
knowledge.
like, I've got a microwave and an oven and directions on that processed food box I got. And mind you, I eat probably more processed food than my family used to, but I know how to do it right. And so that's kind of how the business started. Once us kids moved out, they got rid of milk cows. That's a lot of work to keep up with
Yeah.
as you get older and you're running a ranch by yourself without any kids to help out. And I kind of took on the canning responsibility. So we needed pickles. It'd be almost 2 years ago now and I started making the pickles and I just took an Instagram video. Like, I've got a lot of followers and I was like, oh, doing canning for my family, getting ready to take it home for Christmas. And I had pickles in the background and stuff. And I had a bunch of people that were like, would you make me some? And I was like, I don't know, and had another person ask, well, do you have any extra jars? Blah, blah, blah. And I decided, why not try this? And amusingly, another God directing this thing. My dad had mentioned months before, I bet you could make a business out of canning foods, fruits and vegetables and
Wow.
stuff. I don't know about around here, but especially in Colorado, and I was like, yeah, I don't know. I was just kind of like, that's an idea. And then here we are, 2 months later, got all these messages, and I did a little poll, and I was like, if I started a business making pickles, who would buy some pickles? And I got such positive feedback that I was like, all right, we're doing it. And started with just mason jars and like two kinds of pickles. And now I have 11 kinds of pickles, like flavors of pickles, from my spicy ones to like regular down to sweet ones, that I make and sell online in a couple little mom and pop shops so far. And I sell them at farmers markets here locally as well. And I also have like some markets and stuff I do in Missouri. So that's how the pickles got started. Now I do jalapenos, asparagus, slowly adding to it Bloody Mary mixes, like all kinds of things. And then for the honey, that's another funny story that has to do with my family. We cut wood a lot when I was young, and we were cutting down a tree, and we heard like, and we were like, what is that? And it ended up being this beehive in the middle of a hollowed out tree we cut down. And my dad was like, you guys could collect that honey, learn how to do it, and raise that hive. Like, you should try to get it. And I think I'd have to ask him how old I was. I really don't know. I just remember that it was the first money I ever spent on my own that was like a decent sum of money. And I had my savings, and I went and bought my first ever beehive, and just empty beehive, the basic bee kit, a little bee suit, bought a bee suit for my dad so he could help me, and went to a beekeepers association meeting, and had 8 different meetings that they did, that I attended, and asked a bunch of questions. And I was the only kid in the room that had to be driven by my parents. I was like, please take me to this. I want to learn. And so I learned in these little county association meetings how to raise bees, how to collect hives, and all that. And we collected it all on our own, put it inside the box, collected this swarm. Within a year, we had honey from it that we were able to produce. And just feeding the family, we went through a ton of honey, started replacing sugar with honey and all that. Got another two hives, and just slowly built from there. Now I work with a bunch of local beekeepers as well, and have a bunch of Missouri and Colorado honey that I do.
That's so awesome. Especially how it just came to fruition. That's definitely got to be God too.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we just maybe within the past year, my wife and I bought some stuff, bought mason jars, cucumbers, the whole thing,
Mhm.
the packet of dill and pickle flavor. And we
Yeah.
just decided to make our own pickles, and we canned them
Mhm.
for the first time. And
Yeah.
yeah, I was completely lost trying to do this for the first time. The seal was popping. I couldn't get the thing right. It was just, I was stressed. But we got them, but they were so salty. I put way too much stuff in it, but it was
Okay.
a
Okay.
process. We made some salsa, and the salsa
Okay.
came out
Good
pretty
for you.
decent. So,
Yeah.
we're learning, we're getting it slowly.
Good
But
for you.
we talked about it. I put a post on Facebook, and the responses were just so crazy. Like, people just don't
Mhm.
know about it anymore.
No,
They're
I
just
had
lost.
somebody, he'll probably watch this, so it's gonna embarrass him a little. But the lid on a mason jar, he had no idea what a mason jar was. He had never seen one. He lived like in the city and all that. And he messages me and was like, "Oh no, one of your jars of pickles broke in shipping." And I was like, "Crap, I'm so sorry. Send me pictures. I'll report it. I'll get, the money back, and I'll send you another jar." And he sends me a picture of the jar perfectly fine, perfectly fine, but the lid's in two, and he's got the little like lid part sitting out, and he's like, "Your lid somehow broke in half." And I was like, I was dying laughing on the other end, where he's just texting me, and I couldn't help it. I was telling my husband, I was like, "Get in here and read this." And I had to call him and be like, "That's how a mason jar works. Just take your little can opener or your thumb and pop up on it, and it'll unseal." And he was like, "Oh my goodness, I've never seen this before. This seems so complicated." And I was like, "Yeah, it's funny what you just grow up knowing, Like I just, that's so natural for me. I wouldn't ever even think about someone not knowing how to use it."
The next thing I think we were trying to learn how to do was water bathing or water bathing.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot better than canning. Don't can pickles, just water bathe them.
Water, yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
that's the next challenge. So
All right, there you go.
one
Well, to
step
be
at a
fair, it's
time.
going to be way easier than using an actual canning pot, and much safer.
Great.
So,
Yeah. So it's a learning process. I bought a few books and I'm a book reader, so
hey, there you go. There you go. That
struggling.
works.
But yeah, pickles. They're awesome.
There
You
we
guys can
go.
see this here.
Yeah,
And we're gonna put,
prowlerpickles.com. You guys
yeah,
gotta go check them out. Honey, pickles, all of it's on there at prowler, like prowlinglion.com.
we
Yep,
got
there we
honey.
go.
I think this one's more of a butter, right?
Yeah, so it's actually whipped honey, and all it is literal honey whipped up to be a smooth peanut butter texture.
Yeah. So
Yep.
the pickles I've already dug into, delicious. So,
All right.
and we're gonna put links up to it at the end of the podcast. We'll put
Thank you.
links. So, well, listen, I really appreciate having you. I'm gonna after this, I'll try and get some more information for your dad. But thank you so much for coming on.
No, of course. I mean, I'd love to tell another testimony if you don't mind of
No, go
actually
ahead.
like my husband and I just to kind of say, you asked how God's working in my life. He's already worked in my life a lot, and one of those ways we like sharing the whole story from the way we met to the timing of how we met to how our life's going. Like I mean, there's no way it wasn't God. Like every single point, I was like, this is the person meant for me,
That's
like God
amazing.
meant for this to happen. And it all started, I had a bet, and I know this sounds super silly, from a friend. I would have been 22 at the time. I had only dated one prior time. I was 21 years old when I decided, like, okay, I'm gonna start dating. I better grab somebody before all the good ones are gone. And I had a friend that was like, how do you expect to find a guy if you refuse to date in your workplace, you refuse to date in your gym, and you refuse to date at your school? That's all you do with your life. And I'm like, well, that's true. And that was true. I literally woke up, went to work, went to school, went to the gym, went to sleep. And that's all I did. And I was like, I'm not gonna crap where I eat, so I wasn't gonna date within that. And she was like, you've got to try online dating. Like, I know it's all scary and weird and everything, but you got to do it. And I was like, I'm already a professional athlete. Like that'd be weird, and I just have no interest. I'll do it the old-fashioned way. And she's like, "You are not going to do it the old-fashioned way. You don't meet anyone." And I was like, "Well, God will find somebody for me, like I'll trust in him." The whole thing we were just talking about of,
Right?
yeah, he's not going to do it all for you. And she was like, "All right, how about this? If you get submitted tonight in jujitsu, I'm going to make you a profile." And I was like, "Psh, I'm not going to get submitted." I thought my coach wasn't going to be there. They were actually both in on it together. My coach walks into class like 5 minutes late and winks at me and whooped my butt for the whole round, like submitted me like 10 times just to prove a point. And she ends up sending me on my flight back to Virginia because I came back to visit home at my old gym. On my flight back to Virginia, I get like a bleep on my phone, and it's a text from her with a username and password to a profile she made for me. And now this is a friend who thinks she's hilarious. So I was worried it was going to be like farmersonly.com because that would be something she would have done. And I was like, it probably will be. And she was like, no, it was worse. It was Tinder.
Oh,
And I was like, ew, high school hookup app. That's what we like considered it. And I was like, that's disgusting. I'm not doing that. Like, you could have given me Christian Mingle or something, which I found out later is full of a bunch of weirdos too. So it doesn't really matter what you're on. But I finally was like, all right, I agreed to go on one date for at least 30 minutes. I couldn't leave the first 5 minutes because I was notorious for that kind of thing. And I would be like, I'm a question person. And I knew what I wanted. I was not dating to hang out. I was not dating to have fun. I'm like, I'm dating to marry. So I'd be like, are you a Christian? And if they're, I wouldn't directly ask because they'll probably lie to you. I'd be like,
right,
oh, I'm not too religious. Are you
right.
religious? And if they're like, oh no, I'm not religious, I'd be like, all right, bye. I hope you have a great life. But I'm swiping on this app, and the very first match I get, and very first swipe I made was Pete.
Wow.
And meanwhile, he had been on the app for quite a while. He'd been in the dating life a while. And he actually got blocked from Tinder about 5 minutes after sharing his phone number with me. And so that was a crazy coincidence. He had like turned some girl down and told her he wasn't going to pay for her meal or something. Like the rules on that thing are ridiculous, and people are ridiculous on there. But
Crazy.
anyway, he got blocked on that, and we had just shared phone numbers with each other. So I reached out. We had a date with a couple of days later at a beach in Virginia and met. He was late to the date. I always like joking with him about that. I'm the one that bought the food because I brought it to the beach for him. And I was like, I'm not having somebody like, oh, you owe me for food or any of that nonsense. Like, I'm
Right.
gonna bring the food. So I brought tropical smoothie of all things. And we just ate out there and talked and talked. And I asked him, everything in the book, all the way down to, hey, I probably won't ever change my name. Are you okay with that? I don't want to live here in Virginia. I will one day want to move into the country. Didn't tell him specifically it was Missouri or anything like that at the time. Asked him if he had kids, like went through the whole gauntlet, and he was kind of taken aback. He's like, "Who is this girl? Like, what a bunch of weird questions on a
Yeah.
first date, you know?" And yeah, from that to it being COVID, that's another thing too. It was during COVID,
Oh,
and had it not been for COVID, I would have never had enough time to go on dates with him. You know, I ended up not having my job, ended up not training full time, and him the same way. He was in the military, and so it made it to where he didn't have to go on leave, which was amazing. Because I was really like, I didn't want to be with somebody who was going to be out 8 months. I know that can kind of sound petty to some people, but I just wasn't that person. I knew I wouldn't do well, trust wise, especially if we hadn't known each other for too long. And so I was like, wow, this is truly like God kind of directing me this way. And I got into the UFC 3 days after we met for our
wow.
first date. Got the call to the UFC, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. And he had no idea what MMA was. He literally was like, I was like, yeah, I'm an MMA fighter. And he's like, what is that? What is that? You know? And I was like, oh, it's like a mixed martial arts, like, you know, like the UFC and stuff. And he was like, I, I'm not really familiar. And meanwhile, it's this military dude. That was something else. When we met, when I swiped on him, I was like, this guy's gonna be the most anti person I want to be around. Like the most cocky butthole I've ever met, because he was like, had a flexing picture, had a picture with his motorcycle, picture on the military. And I was just like, oh, yeah, he thinks he's a real tough guy, you know? And I meet him, and he was so introverted, so nice, so
Wow.
friendly. And I was like, weird. Like, this doesn't match up. I didn't even believe it at first, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, he was like, oh, is that the commercials with Conor McGregor in it and stuff? And I was like, that's it. You're on the right track, you know? And I thought I wouldn't like that at all, but ended up being for the best. Didn't have to come home and talk about fighting every day all the time, you know?
That's awesome.
Yeah, it ended up working out perfectly. And after, once if you have ever read this story about me, I don't know how much you know about me, but I went to make my UFC debut. The day before I made my UFC debut, it was a very quick, short notice fight that I took, right? So they flew me straight out to Vegas, like the day that they gave me the offer. And so I had to get all my medicals done there. They took me to the eye exam, found out I had two torn retinas. Couldn't fight. Canceled my fight. I was one day away from having the dream that I had been working for 5 years of my life, you know, being poor as dirt, training hard, going to school at the same time, all this dream that I had had. And they told me, you'll never fight again. Like, we can't accept you for the fight. Uh, you can't even fly back home. Both your retinas are torn, and the pressure from the plane might make you go blind in both eyes. And I was just like shattered. And when I say shattered, I mean like crying on the bathroom floor. I put the phone on FaceTime talking to my dad, and he's trying to comfort me, talking to my mom, talking to my siblings. And everybody's just like so sad for me because we didn't really see a way out, you know, like this was it. And I fly back, and I remember calling Pete. Now, we had only been on 2 dates at this point, or
Right.
three maybe. I think two though. And I was like, hey, you're gonna leave now. I'm gonna be an upset mess. Just want you to know that this isn't like me. I'm not an emotional person, but just heard the worst news I could basically hear, as far as my health goes. Like, I'll probably never fight again. Not that it was my identity, but I would say that I definitely let too much of my life be consumed at that time by it. Almost ungodly, you'd say. I wasn't in the best point of my life at that stage. You know, I was 22-year-old idiot. And he was like, I'm not going anywhere. It's fine. Like, everybody would be like that if that happened to them. Like, I'm here for you. And I'm like, you don't even know me. And he's like, well, we'll get to know each other. It's fine. And I got back, and my dad and mom both encouraged me not to fly back, but I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm too poor to stay out in Vegas. I literally didn't get a dime from that fight because I didn't fight. So I
Right.
flew out, paid all these medicals, didn't get a dime for it, and was back to being zero savings, all that. And my dad flew out for my first eye surgery. My mom flew out for my second one. My first one was on my birthday. Turned 22. Yeah, turned 22 the day of my first eye surgery, and my dad spoiled me more than he ever had in my life. Talk about pity birthday, right? And he had to meet Pete, and we had only known each other about 2 weeks at this point, and I was so scared. I was so scared because my dad's a very man's man, and he had never met a single person I was interested in. I'm his oldest, so it would have been the first time he's ever met anybody. But
Yeah.
luckily, like, I was old enough, he trusted my judgment. I had said no to plenty of people, you know. And he was like, well, if you say he's a good person, I'll try my best. And I was like, I really like him, Dad. Like, be nice, and he was, and they talked. And at the end of it, my dad was like, he's okay. I don't know if I like him though. And, that's kind of how it was. And then Pete slowly earned his trust, earned his respect, because every day he had no commitment to me whatsoever. We weren't even doing anything yet, none of that. He came over almost every day and gave me eye drops. He took me to every surgeon that I went to see. He drove me a tri-state area to find the right surgeon because we had three turn me down. They told me I'd never fight again. They told me I might not be able to have a kid because of the pressure on my eyes once they had the surgery. They told me I might not be able to look at screens for my work because of the surgery. And then finally, as God would have it, I had a friend who knew a friend, and they knew a retina specialist who worked on children, and they were world renowned. And just so happened, this is crazy, to be in Virginia Beach, only about 30 minutes away from me. Now
Wow.
she worked between there and California. And she was like, I can get you in for surgery the next week. And that's when I had it. And she did an amazing job. I'm obviously still fighting. I used an old technique. I have sclera buckles on both my eyes. And I'm at a high risk compared to anyone else when they fight as far as my vision goes. So that's been a hard conversation with family of every
Yeah.
time I fight, should we do it again? Are you
Right.
hurt? And I just keep a very close eye on my eyes when I train, eye pokes and stuff like that. But yeah, Pete took me to all of them, babysat me, and during COVID, he spent a lot of time with me because of that. And I couldn't walk or I couldn't see, so he's basically leading a blind person around without even hardly knowing me. And within a year and a half, we were married, and we've been married now about 3 years. And on Thanksgiving, actually, well, not on Thanksgiving, but the 25th, we'll be married 3 years. And it's been a good life. I know that's early on, and we got a long way to go, but we've
That's
got a bright
awesome. That's a
future ahead
testament to his character for
for
sure.
sure.
So he's got a business
100%.
too, right? I saw you doing logos for his business. What he's doing.
Yeah. So I'm supposed to like keep it on the down low because it sounds anti what I do, but he actually works with peptides and stuff. He's done like
Okay.
the bodybuilding sector and stuff.
Right.
So it's funny because I don't take anything, not even
Yeah.
supplements and stuff, but he coaches people on supplementation and
Gotcha.
steroids and things like that, TRT peptides, mainly for health purposes. So
Right.
like if somebody has an injury in their shoulder and they need like BPC 157 or TB 500, or want help with like fertility or anything like that, he helps out and does that. But his actual like job is he does work as a contract specialist. So he likes to say that he purchases stuff for a subsidiary of the government, basically.
Right. That's awesome. I'm glad you
Mhm.
shared that. That's a
Yeah,
great story. And I think it's like I said, it's a testament to his character. Y'all both,
absolutely.
barely knowing each other, but
Mhm.
I don't know how you felt towards your dad when your dad's kind of like, well, I kind of like him,
Mhm.
you might have a little
No,
issue, but
at the time, Pete was just not answering questions very well. He's an introverted guy. He was pretty nervous. And it was funny leading up to my dad visiting. I was like, my dad's a little different than most dads. I was like, do good, because if my dad doesn't like you, then I don't like you. I
yeah,
was like, and that's just where we're at. I trust my dad a lot. I love my dad. He's my favorite person in the whole world. And if he says you're a no-go, you're a no-go. Like that's just how it is. And
awesome.
he was like, oh, okay. And he was like, that's fine. I've done really well with all the other dads. And I'm like, well, don't tell him that.
Let's leave that out.
Yeah, I'm like, let's not do that. And he did fine, but he told my dad he didn't know me very well, and he wasn't sure what the future looked like with me. And I mean, that was the right thing to say. We
He was
hadn't known each
honest.
other very long. Yeah. And my dad was like, he's my dad. He's like, she's the best thing in the whole world. Why don't you want to marry her today? That kind of attitude with it. And so my dad's like, I don't know, he's kind of immature, he's this and that. And I'm like, well, not everybody can be you, unfortunately, but we'll try to get there.
Yeah, I can't wait to have him on now, but we're trying.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You'll have all kinds of things to talk about with him. Try
Yeah,
to get him to dig deep, but he's got so many stories like
I
of
bet.
things where they just happen in his life so unexpectedly, I guess, but for the better. And I don't know how much he'll talk about his family and all that, but his story is one of those that I want to write a book of one day. He jokes that he doesn't want to be around to read it.
Yeah,
So we'll see, but I'd love to make a story about his life. He's been through hell and back basically. And my dad is so inspirational to me because of what he came from. And that was basically nothing. Came from very much so trash, and has turned his life into what it is now and helped his children to do the same. And now I'm on obviously a much better path than he ever was in his life because of his help, and of course my mom's help too, and now my stepmom's help, and just the sins that have happened in his life and my own life, and how those things have turned out to, with the repentance and with us becoming better people, have made our lives so much better, like tenfold. Has just is just incredible. I hope he will speak to you more about it. I'll definitely encourage him to, and I'm sure he will. Like I said, signal's just really rough in Missouri, so when he's there at home, it's really hard for him to do interviews. But I'll tell him about my fight week and see if I can get him on with you.
That'll be perfect. We'll make it happen if
All
that's
right,
better. We'll make it happen.
perfect.
Before we go, tell everybody again, when's your upcoming fight?
Yep,
When and
December
where?
14th,
All
Tampa,
right.
Florida. Check it out. It's a fight night, so you don't have an excuse. You don't have to buy it on ESPN or anything. You can just go watch it. As long as you have an ESPN Plus subscription, comes free with the purchase. You don't have to pay for a pay-per-view. Not sure if I'm main event yet or prelims. They'll announce that kind of closer to it. I don't pay any attention to that stuff. I just show up and I do my job. But yeah, keep a lookout. And as a note with that, I have a lot of people ask me how as a Christian can you fight someone? Like, that seems so unchristian. I've been called satanic before. I've been called every name in the book for it. And I'm like, listen, it's a sport. It's usually older women, to be fair. And I'm like, do you call your grandson who does football that you're so proud of a satanic because he's given other kids concussions by running into them? I'm like, it's a sport. We've both
Cool.
trained really hard to do this. I'm using abilities God gave me, talents God gave me. I was like, if I felt at any time that the Holy Spirit thought this was wrong, then of course I'd stop. But I use my platform for good, or at least I try to. Every time I get on the mic, I try to represent God, and I try to use my platform to represent God, and do good things. And anybody who's against that, well, what are you doing in your own life? Like, I try to be Christian through and through with how I live, how I train, how I fight, all of it.
You're doing an amazing job, and
Thank
continue
you.
to stand firm in that. Absolutely. Well, audience, we about running out of time. We thank you all for tuning in to another Connecting Through Christ. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok now, and also Instagram. Miranda, thanks again for coming on the show. It was great having you, and it was awesome hearing your stories. Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Connecting Through Christ. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Stay blessed and keep growing in Christ. See you next time.